Welcome to Extraterrestrial Reality. Today there's some pretty exciting news to talk about. It looks like after 30 years we finally have an answer to one of the mysteries with regard to the leaked Majestic-12 Special Operations Manual that was leaked actually in 1994 to UFO researcher Don Berliner. Back then, Berliner had received in the mail a roll of undeveloped 35 millimeter film, and on that roll of film there was a document that showed it was actually, it looks like it was from 1954, that when it was originally printed, that describes how the Majestic-12 operations team is supposed to handle recovered UFO crash materials, UFOs, dead alien bodies, as well as living aliens, and how they're supposed to, how to lie to the press, how to cover the whole thing up when something like this happens. And now UFO researcher Jon Stewart just yesterday published a video on his YouTube channel where he thinks he's figured out the actual place, the location where living alien entities were taken if they were found at a crash site, and it's very exciting. Now, I've talked about this Special Operations Manual a number of times. This is something that has been researched extensively by father and son team Robert and Ryan Wood. There's been books published about it. This is something that Stanton Friedman talked about when he was alive. It was part of the alleged Majestic-12 documents, and I always felt that this Special Operations Manual had to be real. I mean, I just can't see it. The time, effort, and money it would have taken to fake something like this. It would have been tremendous. Hundreds of thousands of dollars it would have taken. I think, as well as a lot of other UFO researchers believe, it would have taken a lot of time, effort, and money to put something like that together. And I believe it is a real document. But anyway, according to Stewart, now he's been talking about this on his show, and somebody had contacted him, one of his listeners, one of his followers, and because he was trying to find out he was trying to understand one of the abbreviations in the Special Operations Manual with regard to where living aliens recovered from crash sites were taken was OPNAC-BBS, and he didn't know what BBS meant. What does that stand for? And now according to Stewart, one of his followers says it probably stands for Bermuda Biological Station, which is a facility that's been over 100 years now. It's been on St. George's Island in Bermuda. And it has some affiliations with the government, as well as a lot of major colleges. There's a lot of marine biological research that's been going on there for years. Now it's called the Arizona State University Bermuda Institute of Ocean Sciences. That's the name of it now. But at one time in the 1950s, 60s, 70s, all the way up into the 2000s, it was called the Bermuda Biological Station of research. And so I think that he's right. I think Stewart has figured out, or one of his followers has hit the nail on the head, has figured out that this is where the government would take living entities back in the 50s, and who knows how long that went on. Maybe who knows where they take them now, but at least in the 50s, 60s, maybe into the 70s, we don't know. But at one time, it looks like the Bermuda Biological Station is where they would take them, and it makes sense. And we're going to talk about all of it in this show. But anyway, first I want to pull up on the screen. This is one of the pages from the leaked Special Operations Manual. This is a classification table that you will find in that leaked document, in the leaked Special Operations Manual, and you can see where they would. It tells you where they would take different items recovered in a UFO crash. For instance, it says aircraft, intact, operational, or semi-intact aircraft of extraterrestrial design and manufacture would be taken to Area 51S4. That's the receiving facility. And if you go down here, here's one here. For non-living entities, a deceased non-human organism or portions of organisms, organic remains, and other suspect organic material. They refer to these things to alien creatures in here as extraterrestrial biological entities, or EBEs. They would be taken to the Blue Lab at WP-61. Okay, WP, of course, anyone who looked at this originally would know that that's most certainly Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio. So everyone knew that, but then again, nobody really knows what OPNAC stands for, and I'll talk about that in a second. But BBS, they didn't know what that stood for either. But according to Stewart, he thinks now, and I agree with him, that it most probably stands for Bermuda Biological Station. That makes sense, and we'll talk about that. Now, regarding OPNAC, we don't know what that stands for. Now, Stewart, he thinks it means Operational Naval Command. I just don't know about that. Because there's another acronym, OPNAV, that's OPNAV, that stands for Office of the Chief of Naval Operations. So I don't know what OPNAC stands for exactly, but whatever it stands for, you can't find that the definition anywhere. So I know it's all guesswork. So I mean, Stewart could be right. He thinks it could mean Operational Naval Command. I just don't know. But if you go by what the OPNAV stands for, Office of the Chief of Naval Operations, you would think that whatever I would think that operations would be the last word of what the full title is of OPNAC. So we just don't know, but it doesn't matter. I think we now know that this OPNAC team, which was mentioned a lot in this document, they would, if there was a living entity, they would take them to the BBS, or as Stewart says, the Bermuda Biological Station. And like I said, I agree with him. And I'm just going to skip forward here a couple of pages to talk about what it states about recovering living creatures. On the page with extraterrestrial biological entities, it has encounters. It lists encounters, and it says encounters with EBEs may be classified according to one of the following categories. Encounters initiated by EBEs. Possible contact may take place as a result of overtures by the entities themselves. In these instances, it is anticipated that encounters will take place at military installation or other obscure locations selected by mutual agreement. Such meeting would have the advantage of being limited to personnel with appropriate clearance away from public scrutiny. Although it is not considered very probable, there also exists the possibility that EBEs may land in public places without prior notice. In this case, the OPNAC team will formulate cover stories for the press and prepare briefings for the president and the chiefs of staff. And then they talk about encounters as the result of downed craft. Contact with survivors of accidents or craft downed by natural events or military action may occur with little or no warning. In these cases, it is important that the initial contact be limited to military personnel to preserve security. Civilian witnesses to the area will be detained and debriefed by MJ-12. Contact with EBEs by military personnel not having MJ-12 or OPNAC clearance is to be strictly limited to action necessary to ensure the availability of the EBEs for study by the OPNAC team. We'll skip a page there. And then it talks about isolation and custody of EBEs. It says EBEs will be detained by whatever means are necessary and removed to a secure location as soon as possible. Precautions will be taken by personnel coming in contact with EBEs to minimize the risk of disease as a result of contamination by unknown organisms. If the entities are wearing spacesuits or breathing apparatus of some kind, care should be exercised to prevent damage to these devices. While all efforts should be taken to assure the well-being of the EBEs, they must be isolated from any contact with unauthorized personnel. While it is not clear what provisions or amenities might be required by non-human entities, they should be provided if possible. The officer in charge of the operation will make these determinations, as no guidelines now exist to cover this area. Injured or wounded entities will be treated by medical personnel assigned to the OPNAC team. If the team medical personnel are not immediately available, first aid will be administered by medical corps personnel at the initial site. Since little is known about EBE biological functions, aid will be confined to the stopping of bleeding, bandaging of wounds, and splinting of broken limbs. No medications of any kind are to be administered, as the effect of terrestrial medications on non-human biological systems are impossible to predict. As soon as the injuries are considered stabilized, the EBEs will be moved by closed ambulance or other suitable conveyance to a secure location. In dealing with any living extraterrestrial biological entity, security is of paramount importance. All other considerations are secondary. Although it is preferable to maintain the physical well-being of any entity, the loss of EBE life is considered acceptable if conditions or delays to preserve that life in any way compromises the security of the operations. Once the OPNAC team has taken custody of the EBEs, their care and transportation to designated facilities become the responsibility of OPNAC personnel. Every cooperation will be extended to the team carrying out duties. OPNAC team personnel will be given top priority at all times, regardless of their apparent rank or status. No person has the authority to interfere with the OPNAC team in the performance of its duties by special direction of the President of the United States. So, as you can see, they didn't care. I mean, as long as they didn't care if the creature died or not, as long as they were able to maintain the cover-up. The cover-up was more important than the being that survived the crash lives or not. But anyway, as I was saying before, they took them to this BBS, this OPNAC BBS 01. It's the only listing on here. It's in that classification table. It's the only one. It's only mentioned once, and it's only for living non-human organisms in apparent good or reasonable health. Anything else would be taken to either Area 51 S4, which as S4 we all know is something that Bob Lazar talked about, or Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, the Blue Lab. I guess they call it the Blue Lab because if it's a dead alien creature, maybe because they turn blue when they die. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe that's why they call it Blue Lab. That's the same place where the Senator Barry Goldwater asked permission. He wanted to see that, and he asked his friend in the military, General Curtis LeMay, and LeMay got mad at him and screamed at him and told him never to say anything about it again. So there we have that. But I think it's exciting now to know that the place that they would take them would be the Bermuda Biological Station, and it makes sense. It makes sense because you have to think about this. I mean, back in the 50s, especially, you would think that. I mean, how many living creatures would they have in their possession at that point? Probably hardly any, if maybe none. And if they were to get one, I mean, you can't have some facility just open and have a facility just for that. You'd have to have a facility where there are people working there all the time. And so I did a little looking into this facility, and I found an article. This was from 1963. It was written by John Beers, and it was called the Bermuda Biological Station for Research. And it was something that was established in 1903 through joint efforts of the Bermuda Natural History Society, Harvard University, and New York University. And it goes on about the history of it. I'll leave links for everything I'm talking about here, including Jon Stewart's video from yesterday where he talked about this. But what I found really interesting was what it talks about later on in this article. It says, and again, this article was from 1963. It says the new station operated the year around until 1940. The new station operated the year around until 1951. The facility is being utilized by a number of investigators for a wide variety of marine biological research. A supporting grant was made for several years by the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, of which the station became the oceanic base. At the end of 1936, the Development Commission of Great Britain, acting upon the recommendation of the Bermuda Oceanographic Committee of the Royal Society of London, made a grant to initiate and maintain an investigation into the variations of the Gulf Stream and North Atlantic Drift in cooperation with the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution. The station was entirely decommissioned during World War II, at which time it was leased to the United States Army for use as a hospital. Reopened in 1946, the station has since undergone a period of extensive growth and development. The station operates as a research facility for visiting investigators, as well as having its own permanent staff in residence throughout the year. It is open at all times to qualified investigators concerned with any phase of marine research, whether biological, chemical, or physical, and to others concerned with scientific investigation in the Bermuda Islands. In addition to the research facilities, several graduate-level courses made possible by grants from the National Science Foundation are offered each year. Included are courses in experimental embryology under the direction of Dr. H.E. Lehman from the University of North Carolina, sedimentation geology, Drs. K.E. Shave and S. Barber, Lehigh University, and an introduction to oceanography, Dr. G.A. Riley of Yale University. So you have all these big brains from different colleges that are working there, studying marine biology, doing work in this marine biology field. But this was the paragraph here in this article that I thought was really interesting. It says, members of the permanent staff carry on an extensive program sponsored by the Atomic Energy Commission and the Office of Naval Research dealing with the hydrography, primary and secondary production, and problems related to the biochemical circulation of phytoplankton nutrients in the Sargasso Sea. So that was the part that I thought was really interesting. The fact that the permanent staff is involved in a program that's sponsored by the Atomic Energy Commission and the Office of Naval Research, and that gives you the connection to the government there. It shows you that there is most certainly a connection, and it makes sense that this would be a place where they would take living alien entities had they survived a UFO crash. That makes sense to me. I mean, you wouldn't have, especially in the 1950s and the 60s, you wouldn't have some place running a light bill every day. How often do you come across living alien creatures? How often are they found? I mean, you would want to have a place like something like this that's in operation all the time. People studying marine life all the time at a place like the Bermuda Biological Station, that they're there, and then I'm sure some of them would have been read in on this program. Some of them would have been part of this OPNAC team, and ones that were there when a living one was found and brought in there. So I find that's very interesting. And it's 30 years nobody knew what that meant. We still don't know for sure what OPNAC means. We can guess, like Jon Stewart guessed. He says Operational Naval Command, but who knows? Maybe somebody out there on the internet will have somebody out there on the internet came up with the Bermuda Biological Station. So maybe somebody else out there in the internet and the world of the internet could figure out exactly what does OPNAC mean. What could it mean? We don't know. I've run it around my head many times over the years. I never even thought about the BBS, to be quite honest, but thankfully Jon Stewart did, because now I think we know where at least they were taking them. We don't know if they're still taking them there. The place is still in operation right now. I don't know if that's still the place where they would take living creatures, living alien beings, if they find them. But who knows? At least in the 50s and probably into the 60s, and who knows, maybe into the 70s, maybe it was the Bermuda Biological Station is where they were taken, and I find that extremely interesting. And it looks like another piece to the mystery of that document, of the leaked document, which a lot of people in UFO communities, they don't think it's real. I do. I think that Special Operations Manual is real. When you look at it, I'll have a link to a website, Ryan Wood's website, where you can read about it. You can read the whole document if you like. I just think that I don't see how somebody could have faked it. I just don't see the time and effort. If it was faked by someone, it would have had to been insiders, multiple people with multiple education in different aspects of government and in different aspects of science. I just can't imagine how something like that could have been faked. I think that document is real, and I've never seen any sort of evidence to show that it's not. And actually, Ryan Wood and his father Robert Wood, they put up a great argument on why it is real, and every objection that comes from debunkers, even from within the UFO community, with regard to that document, they slap them down all the time. If you go to that website and you read through it and you see that document and you read the reasonings why the Woods think the document is real, you'll see that it probably is real, because I think it's real, and I don't see how it could have been faked. Again, it would have been an extremely complex hoax. An expensive hoax. I just can't imagine it. I can't imagine how somebody could have faked something like that. But then again, you never know. There's always that small chance. I'm giving that a 98% chance of being real. Something to that effect. You can never say really 100% there. I guess there is that small chance it could have been faked by somebody. It would have to be insiders if it was a hoax. But I just don't know if I believe that it was a hoax. I think it was real. I think that document is real. They would have to have something like this, right? They would have to have directions when these things happen. The Majestic-12 team, the OPNAC team, right? There would have to be directions on what to do. That document shows you how to create. It instructs them how to crate things that they find, how to ship stuff. I mean, it's just very complex, and I just don't see how it could have been faked. So yes, I think that this does solve that mystery. It makes sense that it would be something like the Bermuda Biological Station. That makes sense to me, and it should make sense to a lot of people out there. I think that Jon Stewart, with the help of people on the internet, has found out what that means after 30 years. I mean, that's been out there for 30 years, right? And nobody knew what it meant. We really don't know what OPNAC means, but I think BBS, that's what that means, Bermuda Biological Station. So good job, Jon Stewart and the people that are following his channel, because I think they solved the mystery. I think that's most certainly the answer. I would say that is the answer. Okay, moving on. I want to talk about something else. I want to talk about, sometimes, I've been looking at a couple of different articles over the last few days about, I always find it amazing, some of these stories where people get hit by rays. They come across, they see a UFO and or alien beings, and then somehow they get zapped with rays, and it causes physical harm to them in some cases, in a lot of cases, actually. And there were two stories I wanted to talk about today that I think were pretty interesting. One was something that took place during the Korean War, and we're going to talk about that one first. Here is an article from wearethemighty.com, and the headline reads, "The time dozens of Korean service members claimed the UFO made them sick." We're going to read a little bit of this article. It says, as a group of American soldiers were preparing to bombard a nearby village about 60 miles north of Seoul, the unit saw a strange vision up in the hills, jack-o'-lanterns wafting across the mountain. Actually, it was just one jack-o'-lantern. Or at least that's the story Private First Class Francis P. Wall and the rest of his regiment told. Even more mysterious is what Wall and his buddies say happened after. A pulsing, attacking light that came with lingering and debilitating physical symptoms. The year was 1951, and the United States was 12 months into the Korean War. Stationed near Chorwon, PFC Wall and his buddies were completely unprepared for what happened to them in the Korean hills. As they watched, an alien craft made its way toward the village. Artillery started to explode. Wall recalls that the object would get right into the center of an artillery airburst, but never seemed to show any signs of damage. Later, Wall confirmed that the object could maneuver through sharp turns and seemed to have out-of-this-world navigational capabilities. Then all of a sudden the object turned toward Wall and his unit. It changed colors from orange to a pulsating blue-green light, one so bright that it was almost difficult to look at. Wall asked his commander for permission to fire from his M1 rifle, but as the bullets hit the craft, they only made a metallic ding sound before falling to the ground. The object started to shuttle, sprint from side to side, and flash its lights on and off. What happens next is even harder to believe. Wall says he and his unit were attacked by some form of a ray that emitted impulses in waves that you could visually see only when it was aiming directly at you. That is to say, like a searchlight sweeps around on the segments of light, and you would see it coming at you. Walls told this to John Timmerman at the Center for UFO Studies during a 1987 interview. Wall recalled a burning, tingling sensation sweep over his entire body. Everyone in his unit rushed into underground bunkers and looked through the windows as the craft hovered above them. Then it shot off at a 45-degree angle. All of a sudden, just as quickly as it appeared, it was gone. And there was actually a statement that Wall had provided to that UFO researcher. I want to read that statement. It says here, "This event that I'm about to relate to you is the truth, so help me God. It happened in the early spring of 1951 in Korea. We were in the Army Infantry, 25th Division, 27th Regiment, 2nd Battalion, Easy Company. We were in what is known as the military maps as the Iron Triangle near Chorwon. It is night. We are located on the slopes of a mountain, below which there is a Korean village. Previously, we have sent our men into this village to warn the populace that we are going to bombard it with artillery. On this night, we were doing just that. We had aerial artillery bursts coming in. We suddenly noticed on our right-hand side what appeared to be a jack-o'-lantern come wafting down across the mountain. And at first, no one thought anything about it, so we noticed that this thing continued on down to the village to where, indeed, the artillery airbursts were exploding. It had an orange glow in the beginning. We further noticed that this object was so quick that it could get into the center of an airburst of artillery and yet remain unharmed." The time element on this, I would say, was anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour all told. But then this object approached us, and it turned a blue-green brilliant light. It's hard to distinguish the size of it. There's no way to compare it. The light was pulsating. This object approached us. I asked for and received permission from Lieutenant Evans, our company commander at that time, to fire upon this object, which I did with an M1 rifle with armor-piercing bullets. And I did hit it. It must have been metallic because you could hear when the projectile slammed into it. Now, why would that bullet damage this craft if the artillery rounds didn't? I don't know, unless they had dropped their protective field around them or whatever, but the object went wild and the light was going on and off. It went off completely once, briefly, and it was moving erratically from side to side as though it might crash to the ground. Then a sound. We had heard no sound previous to this, the sound of like diesel locomotives revving up. That's the way this thing sounded. And then we were attacked. We were swept by some form of a ray that was emitted in pulses, in waves that you could visually see only when it was aiming directly at you. That is to say, like a searchlight sweeps around and you would see it coming at you. Now you would feel a burning, tingling sensation all over your body as though something were penetrating you. Yeah, see, these beings obviously have some sort of a they have it on us, folks. They really do. I mean, they have it all figured out, and I don't think we have a chance against them, against technology like this. No, this is one of the reasons why the government doesn't want to talk about it with people, because look what could happen to you. So the company commander, Lieutenant Evans, hauled us into our bunkers. We didn't know what was going to happen. We were scared. These are underground dugouts where you have peepholes to look out to fire at the enemy. So I'm in my bunker with another man. We're peeping out at this thing. It hovered over us for a while, lit up the whole area with its light, and then I saw it shoot off at a 45-degree angle. That quick, just there and gone, that quick. And it was as though that was the end of it. But 3 days later, the entire company of men had to be evacuated by ambulance. They had to cut roads in there and haul them out. They were too weak to walk. They had dysentery. Then subsequently, when the doctors did see them, they had an extremely high white blood cell count, which the doctors could not account for. I'm not going to read the rest of it, but there you go. This guy actually dropped from 180 pounds to 138 pounds, and he had a lot of difficulty keeping up his weight. So it caused physical problems for these people. So sometimes when people have encounters with these beings and they get hit with some kind of a ray, that ray has provides issues for them that last for the rest of their lives, apparently. And that is the case in this for this incident that happened in 1975 in Loxton, Northern Cape, South Africa, in Africa. And here's another article. This is from the London UFO Research Unit. It says here, on the chilly, misty morning of 31 July 1975, Danny Van Gran was walking over a 10-foot or 3-meter high earth bank which protects his village from floodwater. In the field below him, he saw what looked like the aluminum roof of a caravan. Yeah, this happened on just the anniversary was yesterday. As he drew closer, Van Gran saw that it was made of a curious silvery metallic substance. The caravan was an oval shape, and Van Gran could see 4 people moving about inside as if in slow motion. They were small, thin, pale, and wore cream-colored overalls. They had fair hair, slanting eyes, long faces, and high cheekbones. And they say it's a description reminiscent of the female abductor of the Antonio Villas-Boas case. Van Gran could hear a humming sound when he approached approximately 15 feet from the machine. The entities inside suddenly looked at him. At that moment, there was a slight click and a flap opened up at the side of the object. A bright beam of light hit him in the face. The light disoriented him, and indeed from that time he has suffered blurred and double vision, though prior to that he had had no trouble with his eyes. At the time, Van Gran also noticed that he had suffered a nosebleed, which was later confirmed by an acquaintance. Suddenly the humming noise became louder, and the machine took off very fast and very smoothly. Within about 20 seconds, it had disappeared from view. And there was an investigation into this, and they did find landing leg traces. And of the alfalfa field where the UFO had rested, the landing site itself was barren, the soil hard-baked. Van Gran, echoing Maurice Massé in France a decade earlier, stated, "Ever since that machine landed here, nothing will grow in this spot." Of course, Yeah, Maurice Massé back in 1965 in France. He went to his field of lavender one morning, and there was landed craft with alien beings. They pointed something at him, and he was paralyzed. And the creature got back in the ship and took off, and then he was released from his paralysis. Continuing with the article, it says there is some suggestion that the entities may have done a survey outside the craft before Van Gran encountered them. Investigator Cynthia Hind located another witness, Jan van der Westerhuizen, who had seen nothing but had heard a humming noise at approximately 7:30 in the morning. Since he thought it was a helicopter, he did not investigate. If that noise was the machine landing, then it was there for 20 minutes before Van Gran came across it. At the far corner of Van Gran's field, there was a virtually dried up duck pond, and Van Gran found footprints in the ground unlike those of any of his workers. Although he had not seen the aliens outside the craft, it is possible that they had made an excursion. And I do have a lot of more information on this case, which I will leave links for. I think it's a fascinating case, and another instance of where these beings show they have a lot of cases where they have some sort of a light beam that they could flash at you, which causes paralysis or blindness or something that causes you physical ailments for the rest of your life. In the fact that in the case of Van Gran, he ended up dying a couple of years, 2 years after this incident. His body was riddled with cancer, and he ended up dying. Now, whether the cancer was caused by this incident or not, nobody could say. But who knows? I don't know. And in the case of the Korean guys, well, obviously, if you fire upon these beings, they're going to retaliate, and in a lot of cases, it doesn't turn out too well. I guess luckily for some people who have thought about doing this, luckily they didn't. There's been a lot of cases where people think about shooting at alien craft or the beings themselves, and luckily in a lot of those cases they do not do it. You think about the Vegas case. I mean, they were all armed when they went. Three people were armed when they went into the backyard. Probably lucky for them they didn't start firing, because God knows what would have happened if they did. But yeah, I just think that it's another. These creatures obviously have weaponry, defense mechanisms that could harm us. And in these cases, as we just read, which we've talked about, I mean, the cases in Korea, I mean, that was like that's tantamount to radiation poisoning. When the white blood cell count is like that, that's radiation poisoning. That's what that signifies. So they have the ability to harm us if we try to harm them. Or even if you don't harm them, if you just come upon them and they, you scare them, then they're going to go into defense mode and, zap you with some kind of a ray, and you're not going to be able to see. That guy, his vision for the rest of his life was blurry. He had issues with his vision for the rest of his life, and then he died 2 years later. And whether or not the cancer that he had was caused by those beings and the ray, we don't know. But there's a lot of cases like this. A lot of cases where people come across these beings in a landed craft, and they're sorry they did, because they end up with physical issues afterward. But I thought that those were two interesting cases, and I will leave some links for additional reading material with regard to them if you're interested. Anyway, I want to say thank you all for joining me. Until next time.